people who like to explore abandoned buildings. What was the biggest duck this I'm out moment you had while exploring? A group of us went into an old abandoned care home. We got in legally. It was pitch black, and I mean the type of darkness where you cannot see your hand in front of your face even when you let your eyes adjust. Fortunately, we had a few light sources with us. After walking around and finding copious amounts of evidence that there was squatters staying there, not at the time of our arrival, thank God, we found ourselves standing in a room filled with graffiti, but not graffiti from a paint can. This was spelled in dried blood and excrement. The stench was horrendous. We got out of there so quick and have never been back since. Broke into an abandoned house in the village I grew up in England back when I was a teenager, maybe 15 years ago now. Was with a couple friends but broke off by myself and ventured upstairs. When I turned at the top of the stairs, I saw a figure standing in the darkness just staring at me. I bolted out of the building as quickly as I could, and my friends heard me and panicked. They weren't far behind. Went back there a couple of weeks later with a bigger group to prove my story, and to my embarrassment, it was a tall mirror at the top of the stairs. The figure I saw was me. Not my proudest moment. Found what looked like the remains of a pig, and it was wearing lingerie. Don't talk about my mother like that. Several years ago, a man was murdered in the city I was working in, and parts of his body were turning up at various locations. I think his hand and foot had been found and a week had passed. I'm an architectural designer, and I was surveying an abandoned chapel that was slated to be renovated into condos. It was apparent that homeless people had been squatting in the chapel, but I wasn't sure how recently they had been there. When I went into the basement though, it was clear someone was either there or had just left based on the smell. There were no lights due to the power being cut, and I didn't stick around long enough to see if anyone was currently occupying the space. 2 days later, someone reported that they found the torso and head of the murdered man in a building attached to the chapel. I had been too freaked out by the smell in the basement to continue on to the attached building. But I'm almost certain I would have been the one to find the body. My friends and I went into the Gibraltar mansion in Wilmington. It was cool until we came across a room with an older man squatting in it. He was terrified of us and we felt pretty horrible, so we left after apologizing. Edit. Squatting is a term meaning living somewhere illegally. The confusion this caused is absolutely hilarious though. I walked into an old abandoned cabin in my neighborhood. I saw movement around me, and when I shined my flashlight to the walls, there were thousands of cockroaches and spiders on the walls. I noped right out of there. Edit. Holy crap. I did not expect this to blow up. Thanks for commenting and liking. I'm so sorry for people who had similar experiences. Just reading this made my scalp itch. Hope you didn't bring any hitchhikers home. As kids, we would walk this 1/4 mile railway tunnel near where I grew up. There were no tracks, but it was next to 2 live tunnels, so there was a slight element of danger. That and the fact it was trespassing, I guess, and railway workmen or transport police could catch us at any moment. So as you can imagine, it was dark, real dark in the middle, but towards the end there was enough light to barely see. One day we took an old school pal down there, and after walking the length, almost at the end of the tunnel, just as it was beginning to get light, he stopped to look down a large uncovered square 3 feet by 3 feet manhole. No, he didn't fall in, but after a flash of brief confusion, he took in a deep breath and screamed, then immediately started sprinting for daylight. Oh crap, ducking room. He screams. Naturally, without question we ran, having a hard time catching him up. At the mouth of the tunnel we stopped. All out of breath. WTF, what's wrong? What did you see? We asked. His face was pure white and shaking, barely able to speak. He said, quote, "There was someone down there, looking up at me." Now this buddy was and still is a good friend of mine, but back then he wasn't known for not being the sharpest tool in the drawer. Instantly we had an idea what just happened, but slowly we returned to open manhole. Then as the 4 of us stood around this hole looking down, sure enough, reflected in the still water about 5 feet down this fake hole, was our 4 faces looking back up at us. Exploring an abandoned prison, part of the ceiling collapsed. It didn't hit me, but it was close enough to knock me over. I guess junkies used it as a place to shoot up because I fell on an old needle. I got tested to make sure I didn't get anything from it, but it scared me enough to stay away from abandoned buildings to this day. This is not scary, but it's an interesting story. My friend was walking in the forest and found an old house. When he moved some stuff, the ceiling broke and an old German light machine gun fell down. Exploring an abandoned manor with some friends. We had been drinking and smoking and thought it would be cool. The ground floor entrances were covered with bricks, so we had to enter through the first floor, 8 feet height, using an improvised ladder made of old trash and wood pieces. It was quite unstable and hard to climb, and we were 5 or 6 people. Being the only way out and knowing how slow it was, I was on edge the whole time. We were exploring the floor, cool glass ceiling, lots of debris, but suddenly we find a room filled with plastic containers with pink and brown liquids. Some friends decide to explore the ground floor, which was pitch black and involved going down a broken staircase missing several steps. They heard someone coughing in the dark and feel several people moving in the darkness as their eyes get used to it. At this point, I was hearing someone slowly walking in a room on the first floor, carefully stepping over the broken glass on the floor to not make noise, which was really creepy. We got the duck away, and on our way out we saw a roughed up man with bloodshot eyes leaving a shack outside the house and staring at us. I still shiver when I remember his look. Probably just some junkies living there, but for overly high 15-year-olds it was scary as duck. So I live in Texas by the coast, and one time while me and friends were searching for mushrooms in a cow pasture by the Gulf of Mexico, we found a WW2-era German Luger next to a cow patty, cow poop, sticking out of the dirt. It was in bad shape and kinda rusted, but we have no idea how it got there. We came up with all kinds of theories for how it got there, the most fantastic of which was a German U-boat crew actually landed on Texas soil. That's probably not true, but it was fun for a 16-year-old to think about while picking mushrooms. We found a stack of old computers in an abandoned house on the outskirts of our town. When we opened one of the computers, it was filled with nothing but child pee. 3 of the guys I was with ditched because they didn't want to get involved or convicted. I just called the police and they took them. There was a good 6 to 7 terabytes. Truly disgusting people in this world. Bit more context. I was 13 when this happened and had no idea what to do or who to call. I realized that I should have called child services, some kind of child abuse hotline, or reported to the police anonymously, but I was a young kid and was never told what to do in a situation like that. All I knew that it was wrong and some kind of authority had to be called, and 911 was the only one I knew of. The fact that there's enough child abuse material out there to fill 6 to 7 TB of hard drive space is disturbing enough. Finding a bunch of computers filled with the stuff in an abandoned house is the stuff of nightmares. You did the right thing by calling the police. Some digital forensic investigation and they might have even been able to apprehend the owner of those computers. As 12-year-old kids, we were exploring the woods as kids do. The forest parted to an open field and in the distance was an abandoned farm. Naturally we crept inside, and in one of the horse stores were all discarded hypodermic needles and old food. Our parents were quite mad when we told them what we found. Got busted by a soldier who told me, rather calmly, that the spot was used for training with real bullets, and that I'd better get out of here before he drags my ass to the cop. The guy was really nice, took the time to explain why it was dangerous, and sent me on my way. I didn't insist. Weirdest part is we explored for 1 or 2 hours before getting busted and met no one. We weren't hitting or anything. Training grounds can cover a good bit of area. It'd be very easy to miss a couple of wandering kids. I've been many places in the tri-state area and have experienced floors that are decaying. Once almost fell, thankfully was a very small drop, needles, animal corpses, etc. One time at a prison in New Jersey I saw a cell that was decked out with a decorated dollhouse, and you could tell someone was staying there. The creepiest experience I ever had was about 6 years ago. I was in an abandoned hospital in a residential part of Nick, which had been abandoned less than a decade prior to our visit. Despite this, it was not a well-known location. We went at night and were exploring the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors, all without issue and in total silence. There was little to no graffiti, and everything was left: patient records and tissue samples, medicines, medical equipment. As we reached the 4th floor, we passed a random room that said, "No explosive gases can be used in this room." I read the sound aloud, and we immediately heard a huge thud coming from inside that exact room. My blood ran cold, and I literally froze because I felt that someone in that room was making themselves known. We ran out of there and heard slamming doors as we went down all the stairs. I have not been back there since, and it's now been sold and is being renovated into a housing complex. I still wonder what would have happened if we went into the room. Wow, I can't believe I have a place to tell this story. When I was in middle school we went upstate in the summer. There was an abandoned house in the woods we explored. Top floor was pretty pristine, the beds were made, and drawers/closets shut with stuff neatly arranged inside. There were bats. The lower you went the more disordered. The basement/garage was in complete disarray. Books and random crap thrown around. Beer cans and used condoms. We went to the far end of the house where the wall partially collapsed, and that's when we saw the bear. Foolishly ran with all our might. Thankfully the house between us and bear's lack of interest is why I'm typing this. You must not have been his type. I do urban exploring quite frequently, and nothing ever makes us leave instantly apart from dodgy floors or squatters. However, 5 years ago, me and a few friends explored a derelict farmhouse with outbuildings, which had evidently been left for decades with the state it was in. After having a look around the place and finding nothing but empty buildings, we had a look inside what appeared to be an old stable. Inside was literally hundreds of empty tins of cat food, some nooses tied to a beam, and a fairly new pair of scissors, with a brownish crust covering the blades. The smell was putrid. We ventured further into the building and noticed on the flood was a cat's tail and a few cat's paws which had been dismembered and left on the floor. We swiftly exited, and on our way out a pickup pulled up onto the side of the farm, bearing in mind it was surrounded by woods and fields with no track leading to it, with 3 men stood in the bed. Needless to say, we got out of there as quick as we could and haven't seen or heard anything about it. The farm went on the market and sold earlier this year, so it would be interesting to see who previously owned it. My friends and I were exploring an abandoned military housing complex at night. It was in pretty bad shape, but there were lots of interesting things to see. We almost pissed ourselves a couple times because of mannequins behind doors and stuff. There was also a neat art installation with records hanging from the ceiling. Anyway, we climbed up some stairs to the tallest part of the building. We saw some faint light coming from under a door. Somehow the door had been booby-trapped, and as soon as my friend opened it, there was a crash and a cinder block on a rope that came swinging out the open door and just missed us. I got a split-second look inside where I saw a small fire, a mattress on the ground, and then a man moving quickly toward us. He was silhouetted by the light, so I couldn't make out what he looked like or what exactly he was holding, but I wasn't about to stick around to find out. I yelled run, and we bolted out of there as fast as our legs could carry us. Edit. I found a couple photos from that night. Here and here. Unfortunately, I didn't capture anything too scary for you guys. These are from 2013, and I think the place has since been torn down. It wasn't abandoned. Edit. Okay, this is my most upvoted comment ever, and it's just 3 words. Well, I guess I'll tell the full story. So me and 2 other friends decided to go look around the empty house on the corner of our block. Well, as it turns out, some people actually moved into the house, and so we just walked in there and they were like, we live here. Why are you here? So we ran away and never walked near that house again. Imagine some teens/adults coming in with ducking out your boards and cameras when you're making dinner. Lol. I used to walk around an abandoned building near a forest which was initially a child hospital in the 70s, a refugee housing in the 90s, and a language school for Chinese students till 2007. Since then it's abandoned. The students left quite suddenly, so I found diaries, certificates, and even food. It was interesting since the place was not vandalized at that time. Once I was inside the building again when I realized someone else was walking upstairs. I never left this place so fast, jumped over the gate and headed to my car. When I reached there, a police car stopped in front of the building, and the 2 officers jumped over the fence to enter the building. No idea what was there, but sometimes I wonder if I avoided more than just a report for trespassing. Well, a homeless guy with a knife said I shouldn't be here. I agreed. Late to the party but used to work for a guy renovating houses. He'd buy dumps for like 5 to 10,000 that had been abandoned for years. We'd fix them up, and he'd rent the houses out. His daughter would go to houses to take pictures after he bought them, since he'd buy a lot of them sight unseen because they were so cheap. One house she went to take pictures at, and she was kinda creeped out by the basement and did not want to go in. She just opened the door, leaned in, reached her arm out and took a picture. When her dad reviewed the pictures, he saw a man standing in the basement about 5 feet from the camera, staring directly into it. I have gone down this whole thread of stories, becoming more and more on edge, but I can't stop reading. This is the story that just gave me the biggest chill. A friend and I were exploring an abandoned mental facility that had been purchased by a large computer co. here in Silicon Valley. The compound was massive. It had its own sheriff, slaughterhouse, industrial mechanic shop, on-site homes for the employees, everything a small town would have, in addition to the hospital, school, and a beautiful mansion. All but the mansion were being demolished. The hospital had some creepy, though typical of the time, rooms and equipment, etc. Went through every house, storage unit, outbuilding on the property and found some amazing things, with nothing negative of any kind happening. Then we went into the library. We went up a spiral staircase into the belfry left parenthesis. I think that's what it's called. From the minute we entered the building I was nervous and uncomfortable. On the way up we'd passed rooms full of books and were going to check them out on the way out. There was no one else on the property, and the staircase was made of narrow metal stairs. From the top of the stairs you could see all the way to the bottom. We both heard footsteps coming up the stairs, but when we looked no one was there. We looked in all the rooms on the way down and nothing. There was no other way in or out. Suddenly I was filled with a terror I've never felt before or since. I'm not religious but began praying for my life. We left immediately and the feeling stopped once we left the building. My friend felt something, she said, but not to the level I did. No idea what happened there, but it was truly bizarre. There's a big abandoned factory near the center of our city that teens regularly visit. My friend was telling me a story about how she and a group of friends were walking around the ground floor, almost pitch black in places, when they saw a lone chair in the middle of the big room. They started joking about how it looked like the type of place a kidnapper would tie a victim up, when in the distance they heard glass being smashed. They all took one look at each other, turned around and got the hell out of Dodge, scared it was someone trying to escape. Oh man, my friends and I were exploring the hospital I was born in that has since been abandoned. We explored down to the underground floor strapped with paintball guns for safety. There was all sorts of weird crap, a room full to the ceiling with toilets, mushrooms growing on the walls, etc. While exploring the underground floor, we found a McDonald's burger still wrapped up. I picked it up. It was warm. That's gotta be something supernatural because my McDonald's never stays warm in the 5 minutes it takes me to get from the drive-thru back to the parking lot at work.